Hi, everybody. This is Jason Stallings, and welcome to the Artifice Podcast. Today, I'm going to discuss the history behind a couple of paintings that I did in the last few years, specifically 2020, 21. In the paintings I'm referring to are Dada Love Cats and Futurist Pompeii. Kind of touch briefly a little bit on the more or less like basic history of the influences of those pieces, and kind of like the kind of humor behind the names. Kind of briefly touch on the history of my own like personal ideas that were being infused in there. I mean, I won't get too much into that because I feel like in this particular case, it's good to have like the audience interpret their own kind of take on the pieces. That's with anything I do, but if you're interested and curious, that's I'm happy to share this with you. In any case, so around 2020 and 21, I had sort of created this series of let's say like darker, more intense pieces in introspective paintings that were very successful. I also had a very large commission with Lyons and Simmons, which I've discussed in another video and an article. And by the way, if you want to read up on the full history of these things, I have this very detailed on my website. I'll have this video with that link, but just for the sake of brevity, if you want to just view like the finer points of this, that's what this video is for. And while you're there, if you want to subscribe, like all that stuff, YouTube jargon. In any case, so yeah, in art school, I was really kind of taken by futurist art. I appreciate the sort of humor and levity in conceptual like freedom and just kind of chaos that Dadaism provides. And both of these movements formed and peaked and etc. between the early 1900s and 1930s, moving into the 40s to a degree. Futurism specifically came out of Italy, and the philosophical nature of both of these things are sort of diametrically opposed to each other, but they're also interesting to explore as like a counterpoint to each other. For one thing, the philosophy of Dadaism was sort of a reaction to, how do I say this? The rationale of European leaders is to saying, well, we have to go to war with the rest of Europe because reasons, pride, etc. It was sort of a unique situation that, like most military conflicts, are the result of a combative conflict over land, resources. You can assign whatever philosophy, religion, pride, natural pride, all that if you want to, but at the end of the day, usually, and arguably you could say, I'm sure historically there's some argument to be made about this being the case in World War I, but the impetus was really national pride and sort of being sparked by an assassination, obviously. But the art community and Dadaism wasn't specifically exclusive to one country. It was sort of a collection of different European and I suppose maybe to a lesser degree American artists. But they were creating something that was sort of nonsensical for the sake of nonsensicalness, but as a reaction to sort of the intense horrors of life. And they were influenced by other modern artists like Picasso. Duchamp was a well-known Dadaist, but I would say the literal, physical, artistic expression of Dadaism isn't so much present here, but it's more of my take on it. With Dada Love Cats, I was sort of influenced by someone I was in a relationship with at the time, and we'd sort of had this ongoing joke about these cats with fake Victorian poorly drawn and painted faces. And my goal was to just sort of like alleviate the intensity of some of the pieces I'd done because it was a pandemic year, and I think we all just needed a little bit of a break. I know I did. So I had gotten these two canvases from a mutual friend and a friend of my cousin's. So I set out to make two pieces. I made the second one, Futurist Pompeii, a few maybe months after, and the sort of loose vision I had for that piece changed a little bit after the passing of time, etc. And it was became more of this visceral reaction to just like the way my life was evolving at the time. And again, I don't want to get too much into that, but you get hindsight with things, and you grow and you change, and you just look back. But at the time, it was just more me just capturing how I felt at the moment. But to kind of touch on the title of Futurist Pompeii and the really broader implications of like Futurism, I was very influenced by the physical, compositional kind of ambition of artists like Umberto Becchioni, not so much by their sort of like utopian futurist leanings that sort of eventually evolved into, unfortunately, like this sort of love for fascism. Unfortunately, that was the undoing of the artist, and which is a shame, because while it's not necessarily a bad thing that philosophy and like mindset didn't survive, it's just a shame that we didn't get to see more art from these people, because unfortunately their ideology led them down a path that led to them not living through the war. And it would have been cool to see how that evolved. I mean, looking back, like Futurism, in the early 1900s versus like what would that look like now, would be two very different things. So it's kind of cool to see this kind of time capsule and this highly imaginative art movement. So I really always loved the sort of complex compositional nature of specifically Bacchioni's pieces, and I like the movement and the dynamism of it. And if you want to read up more on that, it's really interesting stuff. Aside from their unfortunate love of Mussolini, which didn't work out too well for them, or Mussolini. So that's kind of why, like, Dadaism being this very progressive, and arguably you could argue, I mean, not everybody in Futurism was this like fascist-loving, utopian right-wing individual or whatever, but that was sort of the prevailing philosophy in the movement. And it's a shame to have that color the history and perception of the work, but it is what it is. So another thing is that when I was 15, I went with my family to visit France and Italy, and we specifically went to see Pompeii, which is the city that was buried under volcanic ash and lava during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, and personally witnessing the sort of like just striking, horrified expressions of the preserved bodies, or the impression of those faces that is still left at that site was pretty fascinating. Also, I mean, Pompeii is where Pink Floyd famously played a concert to a crowd of ghosts, so to speak. And later Gilmore played to an actual crowd, but that was interesting to me. So the sort of like lingering impression years later, in my own personal feelings being something I needed to express, is what kind of made its way into that. One thing that I know that there is a jackfruit, or not jackfruit. There's a specific fruit that is it's grown in like East Asia, and it's just apparently smells like the worst smell in the world. There's sort of a abstracted version of that, and I guess I was just expressing something very raw in those pieces. Anyway, one thing I would say to any other artist is like, and I always feel very like, cautious and awkward about like delving into personal matters in art, but sometimes it's just a form of therapy and you have to go through it. But that was sort of me just reflecting on my own frustration with myself, and it's a growing process. And anywho, but I actually have gotten some good reception for these pieces, specifically Futurist Pompeii. It was in the HO in Dallas 15th annual exhibition in 2023. So that has sort of encouraged me to really dive into that more. But the kind of like, I wanted there to be these opposing kind of sister pieces. They don't have to necessarily go together, but they're loosely married to each other. And but they are like there's influence from like Duchamp's earlier work, but also the just sort of like absurdist nature of these things. There's more so in Dada Love Cats. Love Cats is, yes, a reference to the Cure song. And that's kind of where I came up with the sort of like double meaning, tongue-in-cheek song or painting artwork titles. So I love these two pieces, and I see them as a sort of capturing of a moment in time. And I really wanted to dive into the history of these two movements and how they've really profoundly influenced me. Would love to do more absurdist iconography in other pieces, but that's something that will come with time. And I think that's all I have to say about those. There should be prints for these two pieces available. They're both for sale if anybody's interested in ordering them or having them purchased. Anywho, please, if you're interested in getting more information about my art, please visit jason-stallings.com. Subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you want to message me on Instagram, it's at jason-c-stallings, or you can email me at jason@stallings.com. I'll see you soon.